Let's bring in our political commentator, Tom Mulcair. Tom, good to see you as always. First of all, the pin. Big deal, not a big deal. What do you think?
I think it's very nice of President Trump to have worn that pin. We see that type of pin all the time in the world of politics, and it was just a nice gesture. I'm not reading any more than that into it. Don't get me going on 51st State. I don't think he was trying to go down that road at all.
Fair enough. Okay, so we heard from President Trump when he landed. He didn't refer to Mark Carney as a governor. He didn't talk about Canada as a 51st state. It seemed to be somewhat amicable. Your takeaways, and just the beginning of the summit here, we want to be clear, but there were a lot of things Trump could have said that he didn't say.
And there are a lot of things on the table, but I also know that Mr. Trump pays a lot of attention to what gets said about him. He likes things being said about him, and he follows it carefully. And one of the things that was said by another former prime minister, we've just talked about Trudeau and Harper, but let's talk about Jean Chrétien last week, saying, if he comes in and he says something crazy, just ignore him. He's trying to get attention. That was the gist of the remarks by Jean Chrétien, and I thought it was so brilliantly well put. And that's the thing about Trump. He just loves to create the event and get attention for himself. So today, of course, he was out there blaming Justin Trudeau for something that happened before he became prime minister. And I hope Trudeau doesn't take great offense, but that's the way Trump plays the game. And I think that we've also got people around the table who are showing to Trump that they're there together, working in partnership. There are other countries that are going to be there, big, important countries, big, important economies. India first among them, but of course, Brazil is there as well. So this is also a way for Carney to say, look, we're going to continue working those partnerships. The rest of the European Union, South Korea is there. So we're working hard to show Trump that we're not alone. And we've got partners, but the rest of the world can come together in different ways. It's against a backdrop, as was mentioned in the lead up, Todd, of this increasingly dangerous situation between Israel and Iran. And everyone is very much aware of that. But the very fact that it didn't derail the G7 is, in fact, a good thing, because we do have to be able to talk to each other and try to do what we can to make this a safer world.
I know that one analyst had talked about this because of everything Donald Trump has done since being, sworn back in. A lot of this feels a little bit like, one group versus the United States, a G6 plus one, because all of those other countries around the table have been hit with tariffs. It does seem, Tom, like a lot of energy is spent both in front of and behind the scenes managing President Trump.
No question about that. I mean, that's the name of the game. But Carney did a very good job of that. He, flattered Trump right at the beginning of the meeting, saying that the G7 wouldn't be worth anything if it weren't for the presence of the United States. So that's a way of playing the game with Donald Trump. The ego has to be fed, but it's not untrue at the same time. The G7 wouldn't be anything if the United States were absent. That gave Trump the openings to start musing about Russia. I guess he either forgot about the Russian invasion of Crimea, or he never knew. Or maybe he's, as in the case of Ukraine, he seems to be convinced that it's actually Ukraine's fault that it was invaded by Russia. Maybe he thinks that it was actually Crimea that invaded Russia. But Trump has his own way of looking at the world, at looking at reality, at looking at history. He makes stuff up. He doesn't seem to be singularly well informed. But he is the president of the United States, and we've got to deal with that simple reality.
What does success look like here for Mark Carney, Tom?
I think that the holding of the meeting is a success. I think that the way he has pushed an agenda without putting it too much in the Americans' face. So he talks about the wildfires. Who doesn't want to talk about, the terrible loss of habitat and the economic loss from the wildfires? But that's also an entree to be talking about climate change, global warming, the environment, sustainable development, all things that Trump, of course, doesn't like talking about. But it has to be discussed because it's part of what our responsibility is to future generations. Success out of this meeting is an understanding that the world trade system is under threat right now. Trump calls himself a tariff person. He is essentially monetizing access to the American market. He's the consummate deal maker. Everything is transactional. He just looks at what the Americans pay in defense and how much they have as a way of a trade deficit, and he decides that those are subsidies he's providing other countries. That's his way of looking at the world. And again, there's no, you can butt your head against the wall for all you want, but that's the Donald Trump. That's the reality of what we're dealing with. So I think that smart people like Carney have found ways in to the discussion with Trump will Canada be able to get Trump to respect the deal that he wrote and signed, Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade deal? Is there going to be a new one? No point to that unless the Americans start respecting their own signature, which they don't under Donald Trump. But having President Sheinbaum of Mexico is, again, a coup for Mark Carney, because she has to be part of the discussion, and she'll get to see Trump and not have to sit in that dunce chair in the White House where Trump likes to humiliate his guests on occasion.
Dunce chair. Tom Mulcair with his take. Wow. Good to see you, my friend, as always. Appreciate
All
your
the best,
insights.
Todd.
Thanks for this. Tom Mulcair joining us from Quebec, CTV News political commentator, former leader of the NDP.